Welcome to the C-Suite Mentor, the place where you will learn the tools, strategies, and mindset to scale your business sustainably and build a lasting legacy. I'm your host, Theresa. As a fellow CEO, I understand what it takes to scale a business to 7 and multiple 8 figures. It's not necessarily what you might think. It requires a complete shift in how you think, strategize, and execute key actions in your business. My mission is to help CEOs step back into the driver's seat of their business by optimizing their operations, empowering their team, and staying in total alignment with their big vision. So, are you ready to exchange everything that hasn't worked for strategies that will? You're in the right place, so let's go. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the C-Suite Mentor podcast. If I can get my words out, I have my water here. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. For those who don't know, and maybe you do know, I not only am a CEO of my own business, I am also a fractional COO/CEO of 4 other businesses. 10 years ago, I started working with a client, and I started working with him. My husband and I were shopping. We went into his store. They were having trouble with their software, and it happened to be the software that my business partner and I ran in our own retail store. And I said, I can help you with that. And that was the beginning of the relationship. So along the way, he needed some help leading his businesses and growing his businesses, scaling them, and really figuring out how to build a team because he was burned out and he had these 4 businesses and some of them were failing, some of them were growing, but just growing in the wrong direction. So our relationship grew over time to go from me just helping them with software and marketing to helping him to figure out how he could remove himself from the day-to-day operations, how to remove himself from the business so that he wasn't making every decision and involved in every decision and really building that self-led team. And I'm telling you this backstory because as the fractional COO/CEO in his businesses, we encountered, and it grew over time. This person did not start out being toxic necessarily, or at least we didn't know, but ended up becoming increasingly toxic. And this person was actually was the person that was leading, a main leader in one of his businesses, and it was his most successful business. And I wanted to talk about my insights about leading a business and running a business with a very toxic individual that was a leader in one of his businesses. And not only was she a leader, but she was the person who worked with him to build this business initially. So he had loyalty to her. And I wanted to talk about this because you hear a lot of people talking about toxic employees and what you need to do with an employee. And I am going to do another episode all about the insights that I have being a leader myself. But I wanted to talk about it from the perspective of what do you do or what happens when you have a toxic person in a leadership role, a significant leadership role. What do you do to not only get this person out, but also how do you rebuild? And I don't think a whole lot of people talk about, toxic leadership and what happens, but also what do you do to rebuild the culture and the team when you finally get that person out? And what happens? Like, what do you end up uncovering? So a little backstory about this. And again, I wanted to talk about this because I think it's a more prevalent problem than people realize or people want to admit or even people want to talk about. And I've seen it in the corporate world. I know my husband deals with it a lot in corporate. I've seen it with working with CEOs over the years and having toxic leaders and not knowing what to do with them. So I want to keep this conversational. I am going to give you a framework that you can work in when you are in the rebuilding phase. If you find yourself that you have a toxic leader that you need to get rid of, and then what do you do afterward? Because the aftermath after that person leaves is extraordinary. And it's not an extraordinary, I mean, sometimes, and I've seen it where the aftermath is very like in your face, extreme destruction. But I've also seen it where it's worse when the destruction is so intertwined throughout the entire business and not just found in the operations of the business, but found in the psyche of the employees that this person that reported to this person, or the employees that were in the business, even though they may not have directly reported to them, they were involved in the trickle down effect. I think that potentially, when it's a psychological thing that ends up happening, is so far worse and so hard to really correct and deal with and move forward from. So, the backstory with all of this, and again, I'm going to keep this super conversational, and not make this so clinical, because I know at times when we have these discussions, it becomes so clinical and so just, people give you frameworks and this is what you need to do. Here's your 5 steps. I don't want to do that. I want to keep this conversational because, like I said, I believe that there is a lack of good leadership in this world. I believe there is a lack of good leadership in businesses. And the really sad part is that when we have good leadership in small businesses, we're able to change the inside of our business and impact the inside of our business in a positive way so that we can then change the world in a positive way. But that message just gets lost somewhere. So I want to talk about this because, again, I am on a mission to improve leadership in small businesses, because I believe if we do that, we can take it outside of our business and change the world. So, a little backstory about this. Again, I have been working with this gentleman for 10 years. All right. And when I say that I live and I breathe and I am in it with people, I am in it with people. And I met this leader when I first started working with his businesses. And she was a bit of a control master. And you've heard me talk about the 4 different types of CEOs: people pleaser, control master, visionary, and the avoider. And the control masters, while they can push results, they can also push people over the edge. And their desire to want to control absolutely everything, while on the front of it, and this is what he found, his feeling was, well, she just takes care of everything, so we don't have to worry about it. She just takes care of everything. If somebody drops the ball, she just takes care of it. And on the front, that might look appealing, that someone is just handling things and they're just controlling things. But on the backside of it, it starts to create that toxicity where people think, I'm not good enough to do something, or people become dependent, or people see their role as it's really not that important because somebody else ends up just picking up the pieces. So this person started off being super controlling. And along the way, the feedback was that I was getting from people over the years was that she was extremely harsh and unapproachable. Now, as soon as you hear that someone is harsh and unapproachable, that's a red flag. But the excuse was that, well, this is just the industry that we're in, and it's okay to be like that. So, first mistake of the business owner was allowing that to happen, to just say, well, it's just our industry. This is just the way that the industry is, and people talk to each other like that. So I was brought in to try and soften how she was with the employees, soften that hardness so there was more of a balance. But again, what I was met with was a lot of opposition and a lot of adversity of, well, this is just our industry. You yell at people. You have to be a dictator. You have to mandate things. You have to. And as much as I tried to combat that with, no, this is what you need to do, this person just continually just ignored it. So you can imagine along the way, this just topples. So the business is growing. Certain processes were put in place, certain things were put in place to the extent that she wanted them to be done. And then again, it ended up being the way that she wanted it. So while the business, yes, control masters can push results, they can get results, they can just push people to do things. While the revenue was going up, what we started to see was a trend in people leaving, and people leaving very abruptly and not really giving a good reason as to why they were leaving. And you can start to see, because a toxic employee, a toxic leader, a toxic culture will kill and trump the best strategy and the deepest, strongest vision any day. Why? Because it literally, that toxicity that someone brings when they're trying to control everything, when they are seen as a dictator, when they're unapproachable, that will destroy. And it's like a cancer. It just starts to infiltrate through everything. And people start to get afraid to do stuff. People start to get afraid of stepping out of line. This person along the way, and it just kept eroding and eroding and eroding. So the results were going up and the culture was breaking down. And it wasn't super like in your face breaking down, but it was that behind the scenes, again, people leaving, things starting to fall through the cracks because people were afraid to do certain things, having a lot of adversity and friction between this main leader and other leaders. And I would see this where people were, because I would be coaching all these individual leaders, and you have all these leaders and managers who are trying to grow as a leader, who are trying to grow as managers. And this main person, the person who was like the head of all of them, was not growing and felt that her way was better. And that, again, that she needed to control everything. And the way that she talked to people, the way that she spoke to people was very challenging and very destructive. So you have leadership that's trying to grow. You have a business that the results are trying to happen. And you have someone who is trying to control everything and being extremely destructive. So what do you think happens? Well, the culture is starting to erode. And when the culture starts to erode and the employee engagement starts to go down, your results are going to start to go down with it. So that is exactly what was happening, is that the business was having extremely, really good revenue years, really good profit years, and starting to turn themselves around. But at the same time, and it was very quiet at first, and then it got louder and louder, where the culture started to break down. The employee engagement started to break down. People started to leave. Processes started to break down. And trying to look at that and say, because I would meet with the business owner all the time and we would have conversations about, this is what's happening. This is coming directly from, and it really started to get bad right after COVID, because everybody during COVID went into, we're just in survival mode. We're in panic mode. And that's exactly what she did. So me, as the fractional COO, is trying to repair these things, but I have this giant roadblock. And this, my mentor said to me, he said, Theresa, he said, what's happening is the lake is getting dirty. The lake is getting super dirty and you're swimming in it and you're trying to swim and you're trying to save the fish and save this, but you think that the lake is dirty because you're swimming in it. The lake is dirty because of the environment that it's in. The things that are happening inside the lake is because the environment of the lake is dirty and toxic, not because of what you're doing, but because of the environment that's being created. So, as a fractional COO and trying to, because again, the business owner has loyalty for this toxic leader. So, what ended up happening was this person, we started to put some parameters around what she was able to do and not able to do. And you can see, because before I started working with her, she was able to do whatever she wanted. She was able to control everything. Now we're starting to put parameters in, which is the first thing that you want to try and do is you want to try and, because he wasn't ready to let her go. And that's the thing that really needed to happen. Because when you hold on to toxic employees too long, what happens? They create an even more toxic environment. So the next best thing to do was we started to block certain things that she was able to do. And that didn't go over well. And it started to create, again, it's starting to create an even more toxic culture because she's pissed off and it's leaking out into the team. And you have these leaders that are trying to grow and trying to be better and trying to help employees, and they're being impacted by her because they report directly to her. So we put some parameters in place as far as what she could and couldn't do. And we ended up elevating one of the other managers into a position where they all reported to him, which again, you can see that didn't go so well. So as the fractional COO, trying to start to shift, trying to have more conversations with employees, trying to do some things to put some better processes in place or to even try and fix the processes and just trying to dig into some stuff. And you can imagine the level of adversity that I was met with in trying to do this. And it made me doing my job as the CEO, as the COO, I should say, extremely difficult. And it got to a point where it always gets to this point where the rubber meets the road. And it just so happened that this person said, I'm out, got another job someplace else, and ended up leaving. And this was at the beginning of this year. Now, the aftermath, because here's the thing. There's three things that when you are dealing with this level of a toxic employee, a toxic leader, I should say. And it's not just, like I said, it's not just the outward destruction that happened. Yes, the revenue suffered. Yes, the processes suffered. Yes, the team suffered and the culture suffered. But it was all of that happened, and those were all of the outward things that you could feel. But the internal was the psychology of the employees that worked there and what needed to happen after she left. And the truth is that lesson learned number one, which was something that now looking back, the business owner, the person who actually owns these businesses said, I should have let her go. I should not have enabled her to do the things that she did and treat people the way that she did. So lesson number one is getting rid of a toxic leader. More important, getting rid of that toxic leader faster That was a hurdle that I needed to get him over and get through by just clearly pointing out the facts, pointing out the numbers as far as this is exactly what's happening. And not that this is what's happening. Here's the facts that, how this person's behaving, but also what are the consequences? Decrease in profit, decrease in revenue, decrease in employee engagement, and really continuously pointing that out while also trying to keep the business, running the businesses from that very high level, running them and keeping them moving. So again, eventually this person ended up leaving. But remember, the lake is dirty. So what happens is when a toxic leader leaves, there are three things that happen. Number one, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Toxicity runs deep. And as I said, a toxic culture will trump any strategy, any vision, as strong as it is, as deep as it is, any day. So what we didn't know was that things that were supposed to be implemented weren't implemented. There were things that were being hidden, how money was being accounted for, how things were being bought, how things were being done, just something so simple as how the schedule was being done. There were things that were being hidden. We also didn't realize the level of fear that these employees had, fear of retaliation from her. Even after the person leaves, it is still there. It does not disappear overnight. So there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of confusion, and there was a ton of self-doubt, a ton of self-doubt that a manager felt that I'm not capable of doing my job because I was always told and berated that I wasn't doing it right. And this person left in February and it's July and we still are doing coaching and we are still, getting people help to get over the level of destruction that was done. So you don't know what you don't know. What is underneath the surface, you got to do some excavation. You have to do some digging. What we also didn't know was there were employees that had left and then found out she left and then called and said, "Hey, I'd really like to come back. I'd really like to be a part of rebuilding." So the first thing is realizing, because you're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding. Culture doesn't repair itself just because the toxic person leaves. It takes a lot of redefining. It takes a lot of looking at it and having real conversations, having transparent conversations. So like I said, the first thing is you don't know what you don't know. So when that person leaves, it's going to be a lot of excavating, a lot of digging in. And I can tell you from my own experience, the amount of insight I got into really what was happening below the surface was extraordinary. I have worked with clients who have gone through this and have experienced the same thing, where once they let that person go, they uncovered theft. They uncovered that stuff that was supposed to be implemented was never done. They uncovered that communication was happening to employees that was incorrect. So they believed one thing, but the truth was something completely different. But to experience it myself to this level gave me a whole new set of eyes and insight as to what it really takes to rebuild a business and a culture after you let go of that toxic individual. So the second thing that I've realized is that the breakdown, and you hear this all the time, the breakdown leads to the breakthrough, or the setback is the setup. The truth of the matter is, and that's exactly what it is. And you can experience it in all different ways. So in this case, the breakdown of, oh my gosh, the revenue has declined so much, the costs are up so much because this person didn't want to diversify in where they were buying goods from. They didn't implement the systems and the new ways to do things, so things were streamlined. They just kept going with the old ways and just blatantly telling people, I'm not doing it their way because it's my way and that's it. Like I said, the level of destruction that happens. um, but that breakdown and what we've experienced, and I've seen it with client after client that we've gone through, that I've helped to navigate this, is when you have that breakdown, it is a chance to look at how you do things differently. And the first thing I said once we were able to get her out was, we need to go back and dig into every single process, every single system, and see how we're doing things and how we can do things better. Because the information that I was giving them was, we have a lot of waste, our costs are up, our profit is down, there are missing pieces somewhere, we need to dig in and find them. But when you have someone who doesn't want to do it because they want to do it their way because they think their way's better, of course it never gets done and the profit keeps eroding. So once we were able to kind of get rid of that, and there were actually, quite frankly, two toxic employees that left at the same time that were tied together. So when they both left, we were able to dig in and look and say, okay, how are we doing things? If you listen to the podcast regularly, one of the things that came out of this is the French fry story and streamlining the process for French fries, streamlining the process for just how schedules are done or how things flow through different parts of the business, the bakery, the main restaurant, the banquet area, uncovering money wasn't being accounted for correctly in the banquet area. So there were different things that happened that took it from a breakdown of, because the owner did have that feeling of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I don't have this main leader. And one thing that happened was, or what I said to him was, let's look at this differently. Just because, okay, you don't have this same manager here anymore, it doesn't mean that we need to hire the same role. Let's look at who we have in the organization and how can we elevate them? Who has what strengths that could fill this role that we need? And then let's move from that place. So it was looking at the people and the processes and the priorities that we had and redefining all of them to redefine the experience for the employees, the experience for the customers, and the experience for the managers, but also the experience for the business owner. And getting him the understanding that just because this breakdown happened doesn't mean that you're going to have to spend all of your energy rebuilding this. We need to rebuild the team, and collectively the team is going to rebuild all of the processes and rebuild the business, but also rebuild the culture. So it gives us a chance and a new way to look at things. It gives us a chance to look at things and say, okay, how can we do them better? How have they been done, which has led to destruction, and how can we do them better? So the third thing is, you got to be patient, and then be more patient, and then be more patient. Because the conversations that happen after that person leaves is a lot of transparency and being willing to be transparent about exactly what is happening or what had happened and the erosion that happened, but also what are we going to do now to continue moving forward? What are we going to do to improve things? And also to let people know you have an open door. If you have a concern, if you have a question, please, I'm here. I want to listen. I want to understand so that I can make the experience working here even better. And it's something that I have preached for 25 plus years, after working in corporate and working working with different industries, different businesses, is always have that open door policy. Set some boundaries around it, but have that open door policy. And let me tell you, after that person left, the conversations that happened after that with managers, with employees of the other businesses that I was much more involved in, and really from a COO perspective, the conversations that we had and the insights that we got into, again, the psychological piece of it with the results and the aftermath after this person left. From people feeling like they weren't good enough, from people feeling like they only had worth to the business if they were working 10 or 12-hour days. People feeling like their privacy was invaded, because if they called out sick, then it was like the Spanish Inquisition as to why they were calling out sick. And it was funny because digging into files and digging into records that this person would keep, the level of detail that this person dug into the privacy, into private lives of people, was mind blowing. Mind blowing. So the conversations that I had in the beginning, and then even continue to have, to try and to start to, you're not a cheerleader for these employees. You're not a cheerleader, but you want to let them know that you are empathetic to what has happened. Number one, first of all, you got to be a really good listener, and you just have to listen to hear, okay, what has happened? And then to let them know, I hear you, I understand you, and this is what we're going to start to do to move forward. And the key thing with this is to start to give them, again, be patient, but then be even more patient. Because it goes like this. It's not like you have one conversation and it's fixed. You have to have conversation after conversation. It requires setting goals and then going back and taking those goals and saying, this is what we want to accomplish, and making sure that it gets implemented back into the business. It requires getting input from all different parties, and then as a leadership team, starting to make decisions as far as this is what we're going to do to move forward. But I think going back to being transparent, letting them know, being a good listener, and also letting them know, I hear you. I feel you. I'm here for you. And we're going to get things fixed. We're going to work to improve things. So the 5-part framework, or the 5-part framework that I always use is, number one is you want to start engaging with people. You want to engage and get that connection started. Because number two is you want to show, once you engage with them and you're having those conversations as far as what happened from an internal perspective, but also the external stuff. The internal is the connection to self, that where their worth comes from. I mean, these people felt like their worth was solely based on the amount of hours that they worked and what they produced, not even who they were as a person. I found out things about people and their capabilities and their skill set and their strengths that I would have never known unless I had those conversations during those breakdown periods. So number one is the engage. Start to engage with people. Having that, we had a group conversation. We had a group meeting, a team meeting where we talked about, okay, we understand there were some problems. We understand this person is no longer here, or these people are no longer here. So this is what we're going to do. Open door policy with some boundaries set around it. And start to show them that you have empathy. Because the biggest thing that you need to build again is trust and connection with the team. The next thing is you want to empower them. You want to start to, or I'm sorry, empower is after that. Execute. So we want to start executing things. So if you tell them you're going to do something, do it. But also if you give them some guidance and some goals that you set with them, make sure that they start doing it. Hold them accountable. Number one, doing that will start to build some momentum So you're starting to build that foundation back again. And now we want to start to get some momentum, even if it's the smallest bit of momentum. We build the motivation, we get some momentum. We give them something to work towards, we get some momentum. So we want to start to build that momentum. We want to build that trust, start to rebuild that trust and that connection. And then we want to start executing so we can start getting that motivation back and getting that momentum back. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you commit to something, do it. All right. Because that's what employees need after someone like this leaves. And then the next piece is the empower. Empower them that they got this. They can do it. We have these new processes. We want your input. Give your input. If you have new ideas, we want to hear it. We might not implement all of them, but at least we want to hear it. So we start to get that empowerment. They start to feel like someone isn't controlling every single thing that they do. Someone isn't micromanaging them, which is the biggest eroder of motivation and self-worth ever. So getting rid of that micromanaging them, letting them know that they are empowered to do their job, even sitting with them. And I can't tell you how many people I did this with, redefining their role because they weren't even really sure what their role was. So redefining the roles, redefining who you really need. And you might find that you're going to move some people around, which is exactly what I did. I moved some people around. I moved people around. I elevated other people. We split roles in half and really focused on finding what each individual's strengths were, what their super skills were, where their extraordinary abilities were. And that's what we aligned with what we were trying to accomplish as a business. Because the last piece is that elevation, which is exactly what I just described, is to start elevating them. Looking at a new framework for what worth is as an employee. And what it is who you are, really bringing out who they are as a person, their super skills. What strengths do they have? What ideas do they have? What are their experiences outside of what did they do before they came here? Looking at all of that and then saying, okay, this is what the business needs. And here's how we're going to align your greatest strengths with what we want to accomplish as a business. And redefining what that whole thing looks like. And then saying, okay, we can do great things together with your extraordinary skills, the business is going to do great and you're going to be great. So we want to make sure that we are engaging, that we show empathy, that we start executing things. We show movement and momentum. We empower people to make decisions and let them know they are worth more than just clocking in and clocking out and doing work while they're there. They're worth more than that to the business. And then the last piece is elevation. You will see a decline at first, it's a little dip, but then you're going to start to see things go back up. And that's exactly what we found, is that things dipped, but then they start to go back up. And the level of engagement with employees gets deeper. And the level of satisfaction, the level of not even satisfaction, but fulfillment that the employees feel is greater. But the first piece is we got to be human. We have to be human and really say, okay, we messed up. We kept this person on too long, or this person was here and we didn't really realize exactly what was happening and the destruction that was going on. But we want to fix it. We want to fix it and we want to be better. We want to make this place better for you so that we can all succeed. And then it's work. It's the real work that needs to be done. It's owning the decisions that were made prior and saying, I'm going to own the better decisions that we're going to make moving forward. I think the key thing, like I said, and I said this several times, is recognizing that someone is toxic and removing them, especially in a leadership role. And for a lot of business owners, that's very hard if it's someone that's been with you for a while, especially if they've been with you from the beginning. But that person will cost the business way more than increasing costs or increasing expenses. They will cost them way more. because the consequences of keeping them are destruction to the culture, which is everything. Culture is everything. Destruction to people, destruction to the experience that you create for customers. It was so palpable, customers felt it. And then you have the destruction to your profits, to your processes, and the operations of the business start to fold down. So what we want to do is put things in place so that you can start building that foundation again and start building the business back up. So I hope that this helped you. Remember 3 things. Number 1, you don't know what you don't know. So you got to dig deep. You got to do some excavating. Number 2, the breakdown leads to the breakthrough, for sure. It gives you new perspective, new ways of doing things. Number 3, be patient and then be patient again. Be willing to be transparent and be vulnerable, not a cheerleader, because they don't need a cheerleader. They don't need a cheerleader. They need someone who has empathy. They need someone who is kind. And when I say kind, willing to hear what they have to say, willing to hear how they feel, willing to hear their story so that they can then make things better. So from there, we can engage and show empathy so we can build trust and connection. We want to start executing and empowering so we can build motivation, movement, momentum. And then number 4 is elevate so that we can really start to change the trajectory of the business now that we have that out of there. And hopefully moving forward, you won't let that toxicity fester in a business. Because remember, culture and people are everything. Everything. If you don't have that, you got nothing. You're a dirty lake. So I hope this episode helped you. If you're looking to get more information about maybe you're having trouble with leadership in your business, maybe you're having trouble with your team in your business and aligning the right people and processes and priorities, I would love to have a chat with you. We'll just have some virtual coffee. If you go to teresacantley.com/virtual coffee, book a call with me. Let's chat. Let's figure out what we can do. Let's put some action steps into place. Let's dig in and hopefully get you moving in the right direction. But until next week, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you back here again soon. Take care. Hey there. Thank you so much for listening. If you found value on the show, please follow the podcast so you never, ever miss an episode. And I would love, love, love if you would leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for me. Even better, share the show with a fellow business owner ready to step fully into their CEO leadership role. Because right now, more than ever, the world really needs next level leaders. And by the way, did you know you can text me all your questions and get real-time feedback? You absolutely can. Just text the word CEO to me at 610-215-2838 to get connected. One last goodie for you before I go. If you're ready to scale your business and have a co-creator working right by your side, my C-Suite Mentor Program may be perfect for you and your possible new second in command. Just visit thecsuitementor.com to get started.